You're listening to the Rent Roll Radio Show with Sterling Chapman. Hey, Rent Roll Radio listeners, as always, I'm your host, Sterling Chapman. Today, we're joined by Jeff Greenberg. He is the CEO of Synergetic Investment Group. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming today.
Well, thank you for having me. This is great. I'm excited to do this.
So I met Jeff in Orlando a few weeks ago at the Multifamily Masters event. So I was sitting in the corner by myself, and he was gracious enough to come over and chat with me. So turned out he's got a tremendous amount of experience in the multifamily space, doing huge deals. So we're really looking forward to having some of his wisdom shared with us today. Jeff, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, how you got started, what you're doing today?
Got started a long time ago, about 2007. Where I started looking at commercial real estate. I actually was looking for single family homes. It was not a real good time to be doing that, doing the REOs, bank-owned properties, but had a limited amount of funds, and I wanted to see what I could do with my funds. Then when I heard that in commercial real estate, I could use limited funds and leverage other people's funds to help me get into deals, I started going towards commercial real estate and bought my first multifamily deal in 2010 and have been doing that since then until, so I've been buying student housing and multifamily properties. And more currently, I'm focusing mainly on the equity side, and I'm a fund manager creating a new fund coming up, should be opened up in another week or so, where we'll be investing in all different types of commercial real estate acquisitions.
So for our listeners that are not as well versed in the commercial side, can you kind of elaborate a little bit more about exactly what you mean as a fund? So and educate me as well. So what I think is, a typical multifamily syndication is when, we find a 100-unit apartment complex, and we need X number of dollars down. So we go raise that from private investors, and that's the equity. And then we get a loan to buy the complex. When you say fund, you're not finding an apartment complex. You're strictly raising capital and investing it into other people's syndications.
Yes. But let's clarify a little bit. When someone talks a fund, they may create a fund for their own deals. So okay. in your example where you're acquiring properties, maybe you don't want to have to raise money for every single deal. And so you create a fund, say a $10 million fund, people put in it, and you take $2 million and put it into one deal, and you put another two into another deal. So that is a use of a fund that basically you as the deal sponsor could use and make it a lot easier and quicker to be able to get into deals, because if you already know you have the equity, it's a lot easier a lot of times to get into deals and not have to raise the money after you already got the deal. You already have the money coming in. So that's one use of the fund. But as you said, if I'm an outsider coming into somebody else's deal, yes, I could create a fund, have the people pledge their money that they're going to be in a deal. Then when a deal comes in, they could go into those deals. The typical multi-deal fund is more pretty much what we call a blind pool, where you put your faith in the person running the fund and they may give you a criteria of what kind of deals are going to be getting into. But once you're in the fund, you're in whatever deals they bring in, and you're spread out amongst all those deals. What we're doing is different. What we're creating that's going to be coming up, like I said, should be opening any day now. We're just on the last stages of it, is going to be a deal segregated fund, which means that it's not going to be blind. I'm going to create a fund that has general idea of what we're going to be getting. And every time I bring in a deal, those people either in the fund or outside of the fund have a choice of being in that deal. they don't have to be in the deals that they don't want to be in. If they don't happen to like a certain area or a certain asset type or something, they don't have to be. And so all of this is under the umbrella of this fund, but you get to pick and choose which ones you want to be in. And that gives us an advantage that we don't have to start a new fund every time we want to get into a deal. And we also have varieties of what kind of deals we can get into. It's going to make it so we're going to be able to be real nimble and be able to get into deals quickly. And there's several different types I like. Besides just commercial, or besides multifamily, there's also self-storage, mobile home parks. There's also assisted living. So we could get into all those kinds of things in my fund. And if people don't like a particular type, they won't go into that. They don't need to.
Awesome. So let's go back a little bit. I've got some questions. I feel like we skipped over some pretty significant steps there. So you were looking at maybe buying some, bank-owned houses when everything was kind of going south in 07, 08. And somebody goes, oh, well, actually, you can raise money and buy commercial real estate without really putting your money down, which is a great aha moment. But how did you make that transition? I feel like there's a lot of education. How did you learn what a good deal is, how to find a good deal, and also how did you start raising money from strangers with seemingly no experience at the time in that arena? Excellent
question. The fact is, I met a guru at a real estate event that was promoting his boot camp, and I went to his boot camp, and I went into his mentoring program. And so that was essentially how I started learning the business. I did have a coach and, started from that point and learned how to evaluate properties.
Was that was a good experience, I assume?
It was, but it doesn't mean that it has to be the way people need to do it. There, as far as people getting into the commercial space, they need to learn the basics of the business, how properties are evaluated, how to put a price tag on them. There's so much. Some people do better with a mentor that they pay, and some of these programs could be, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. I know one person that's charging $100,000 for a course. But anyway, there are those that do it that way. There's others that find a way to become a resource for an experienced syndicator. So if you happen to live in a great area for investing, you could be boots on the ground and help find properties for an experienced syndicator. And now you're bringing value to that syndicator. And so the syndicator is going to be able to help you learn. So learning as an apprentice is a great way to learn. And you could, make some money on the GP side. For the most part, what's valuable is the learning taking place being side by side with an experienced syndicator. Now, maybe you have money, or maybe you are in a field where there's a lot of people that have money. Maybe you're in technology, or you're a doctor, or whatever it may be. And maybe you could help bring in investors. Maybe you just have a lot of time on your hands and you can make phone calls and do research and are great with the computer and can find things. Or maybe you're good with numbers and could do, the analysis and evaluate deals. You're good with spreadsheets. So by bringing value to an experienced person, not only are you getting that experience working with them, but you're also gaining your credibility. Now you go and take down a 100-unit property with somebody else because you helped them do something on that property, and you could go, hey, I'm on the management side of a 100-unit property. That's credibility. And now you go on to the next one and you do a couple of those. And now you've got some great credibility and you could work your way into where you're the main GP. Okay. You might be a minor player to begin with and make very little money out of it to begin with. But as you gain that experience, then now you become a bigger player.
Awesome. So what did you do before you got into commercial real estate? I
was in IT. And I did that. I continued to do that for 8 years while I learned. So I was doing that for 8 years, working a full-time job and doing this business as well.
Awesome. So because I still have a full-time job and there's kind of a lot of back and forth about when you should quit. And I'm able to balance my time very well because my job is very flexible and I've been able to do everything I want at that pace with real estate. But what is your metric for when you decided, okay, it's time to leave the full-time job? And do you feel like that impaired your ability to asset manage any of these projects in any way? I've interviewed folks before that said, oh, you should invest with only a full-time guy. And so I'm just curious your thoughts around the subject.
Well, I never had anybody say that, but I do know people that have felt that way. And right now, as far as with my equity fund, I will only work with people that are doing it full time because I know how stressful and how difficult it can be. So, but I was able to work around my job in IT. I was able to get my job done and get things done either early in the morning because I'm in California, so I could get up real early and, talk to people in Texas, or during my lunchtime, I take care of the stuff. And I also had the advantage that my business partner was full-time doing this. So she was full-time doing it. Now, as far as personally, it came up, I really didn't figure when I was going to quit. But when my boss came and said he was giving me a new project, that he wanted me to lead a team on this new project, I just couldn't imagine myself going into something new on the job when my mind was somewhere else. And so this was during an evaluation process where I got a good evaluation and he gives me this new project. And I looked at him and I said, no, I'm not taking the new project. And I gave him 60 days notice only. I gave him 60 mainly because I knew bonuses were coming and I didn't quite know when the bonuses were going to come. So I wanted to make sure I was still there for the bonuses. But he looked at me with surprise at first, and then he smiled because he knew I'd been doing the real estate. And so he just knew that the day was going to come. And I hadn't planned that day. It was a surprise to me. It was a surprise to him that I just quit on the spot and gave him the 60-day notice.
That's awesome.
But I definitely would tell people that, you gotta make sure that you can cover your expenses. I had one of my coaching students when I first got on the first call with him. He said, I just quit my job. I've got 12 months worth of funds. And I'm sitting there, oh, crap. I said, I didn't tell you to do that. I don't recommend that, but let's see what we could do. And so I don't recommend that. You need to be able to pay your bills. And I'll tell you something. In this business, you can get rich, but it's not get rich quick. You get into a syndication. And example, on that first deal we got, it was a 20-unit deal. And it was probably too small to syndicate, but we did it. And we got a small acquisition fee up front, very small, because it was a small deal. We never made it past the pref. So the investors got all the cash flow. We got zero cash flow the entire time we held it. And then at the end, when we sold it, we got a small amount because, again, as I said, it was a small deal. So I certainly couldn't have lived on what we made on that deal. It was a great education. A friend of mine calls it a seminar. It was a great seminar. But the money wasn't there. So it was the basis for our next move, which was the next property. And the next property, again, we got a decent acquisition fee, and didn't get very much at all during the hold, and made a real nice chunk at the end. But if you have to wait 3 to 5 years before your payday, you better have a job or some other funds available. Even if you're taking an asset management fee, that's not a lot of money. And if something happens that you have to hold off on taking your asset management fee because there's a problem with the cash flow on the property, you want to make sure that, you're able to hang on and pay your bills. You got to pay your bills. So my thing is when you could pay your bills, from either the cash flow or you have enough reserves, then it may be time. But certainly I would not quit your job until it's necessary or till you're able to.
Awesome. So switching gears a little bit, you've mentioned multiple different asset classes that you're both interested in and potentially would invest in with your fund. How do you feel about those asset classes in relation to our current economy and kind of where the economy is going?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, multifamily right now is doing well and has been doing well for a long time. I'm always concerned when it's been so good for so long, but there is a huge demand for multifamily. There was a huge shortage in the U.S. For multifamily properties. So in the right market, multifamily, I think, is going to continue to do very well. As far as self-storage usually does very well on good economies and bad economies. Good economies, people buy too much crap and need places to store it. And bad economies, people double up with other people, move back home, and they need places to store their stuff. So self-storage is great. Mobile home parks, a lot of times, is a last resort for people. That the next step from a mobile home park may be on the street. So mobile home parks, I feel, are going to do well for a long time to come. And the other thing is there's more mobile home parks being torn down than built. So it's a declining asset as far as the number of properties available. It's very difficult to open up a new mobile home park in communities. Communities typically do not allow new mobile home parks. So that is going to create a demand. Definitely going to be a demand for that. The assisted living, which is another one of my asset classes I want to get into, is my generation is just getting older and older and older, and there's going to be more and more demand for assisted living facilities as we live longer and longer. Now the assisted living did get hurt some with COVID, but I think it's pretty much under control and understood, and there's a lot of new sanitation practices going on. But there's still going to be a huge demand. People in the U.S. don't typically have their multi-generational people living at home like you see in other countries. Typically, we'd rather have our parents, in a nice facility or a nice, maybe even a residential home, assisted living home, where they can't, where somebody else is helping to take care of them. So there's definitely going to be a demand for assisted living. So those are the ones that I like the most. I have people talking about other aspects that I'm not as comfortable with, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't. I mean, retail, I don't care much for retail, the Amazon effect, but there's a lot of businesses that can't be shipped overseas. And some of those might be good, but I like medical offices as well. Medical offices, warehouses. Now that we do more shipping, those are other asset classes.
What type of markets are you looking at?
It depends on the deal sponsor. I'm looking, with deal sponsors that are all over the place. And the main thing is when they bring me a property is, do I like that particular market, or they need to convince me why I should like that particular market. So I'm not really looking at anything specific. I would like to have stuff a little bit closer to home. The flights are a lot easier out of California. If it's in Arizona or something, or even to Texas isn't bad. When I'm going all the way to the East Coast, it's just a long flight. I would just rather have things closer to home, but I don't visit the properties that often. I don't need to. There's going to be a lot of people in between me and the running of the property. So I would take things in Florida as well as the Carolinas. I've got properties in Ohio and Georgia. I'm open to a lot, nothing specific, but they need to have the good demographics, and the economics have to be right.
Awesome. So real quick, I want to switch to our radio round to help our listeners get to know you a little bit better. It's just 3 quick questions. The first one is, what's your favorite book?
As far as, I have lots of favorite books. The one that I've always liked is the E-Myth, which talks about systematizing things. That's always been helpful. The cash flow quadrant from Kiyosaki is very eye-opening as far as thinking about what it means to be an investor or a business person rather than an employee or self-employed. So those were very much eye-opening books.
Awesome. What's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote is a Brian Tracy quote, and it's, in order to achieve things that you've never achieved before, you must be willing to do things you've never done before. And I like that because it tells people to kind of get off your duff, get out of your comfort zone, become uncomfortable, get out there and do something different, because otherwise you're going to be in the same place, 5 years from now.
Sure. Absolutely. So, what's your favorite thing to do when you're not working?
When I'm not working, I'm either bike riding or I'm spending time with my grandkids.
Awesome. So how can our listeners find out more about you, get in touch with you, invest with you, get coached from you?
Well, they could go to synergetic.ig.com. That's synergetic.ig.com, or you can write to me at jeff@synergetic.ig.com.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, I really appreciate you joining us today. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I didn't realize you were going into the fund. That sounds really exciting, and I definitely look forward to learning more about it and keeping up with you on your journey.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rent Roll Radio Show, brought to you by Crestworth Capital. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a rating and review. You can also visit us at crestworthcapital.com or rentrollradio.com, or follow us on Facebook at Rentroll Radio or at Crestworth Capital. If you would like to reach us, feel free to shoot us an email at info@rentrollradio.com or sterling@crestworthcapital.com. We hope you come back next week to join us on some more of our journey. Until then, happy investing.